Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mind Rehab. I am Nicci Willis, and
I'm Jameen Willis.
today we will be talking about part two, right, babe?
Yep.
And that is the inspection process, but what has never worked.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Stay tuned. Here we go. So before we get into our topic, first of all, we just want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed, who has listened, who has liked, who has given us feedback. We are so appreciative and grateful. And y'all are giving us life out there. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If this is your first time listening to us, we would love to get a review from you. If you really like it, give us 5 stars. And make sure you share. Make sure you subscribe, share, so that you can get all of the podcasts that we have every Thursday. We are dropping a new Mind Rehab podcast, so you want to make sure that you are subscribed. Also, if you want to get all information about Mind Rehab, about Jameen's upcoming book, all that, you want to go to jameenwillis.com. That's JAMEEN Willis.com. Also, if you want to follow us, you can follow him at Jameen Willis. JAMEENWILLIS. All right, I think that's all my church announcements. Let's get into it. So, babe, we're talking about the mind rehab process. We're talking about, we talked about the demo process. Now we're into the inspection process. And if you haven't listened to our previous episodes, make sure you go back and listen to those, because right now we're building the whole process.
Yep.
We're building on top of each process. So go back, listen to the first one, listen to the second one, and that'll help you build this thing contextually, okay? So now we're in the inspection process, and we're talking about what has never worked. So last week we talked about what's not working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But this week we're talking about what's never worked. And I think that is, we need to make sure we define both of them. Like there's one that's what's not working anymore, and then there's one that's never worked.
Yeah. So last episode we talked about what's not working anymore, and we talked about our story, my story, about how at one time when I was in my early 20s, I got into real estate. It gave me a sense of purpose. I had a career.
Yeah.
When my friends were graduating from college and just starting to start their careers, I had already been in my career for a few years.
Right.
I bought my first home. I had a nice car, things like that. And so real estate worked well for me during that time period. But as the market crashed and I started to identify what I was really good at, what I was passionate about, I got we talked about going from ambition to meaning. So there became a time period where being a realtor full time in the real estate business and everything like that wasn't the best suit for me anymore. And to kind of compare that, is similar to a NFL player or NBA player, like I was talking about earlier. So like I was talking about Tim Tebow.
Okay.
I always liked Tim Tebow. I was rooting for him in the NFL and things like that. But when Tim Tebow was in college, he was killing it. I mean, Tim Tebow broke records. He was a great quarterback and everything like that. But then when it came to that next season, it just wasn't working out for him. He was quarterback.
Like this is when he went pro?
Yeah, when he went pro, he was a quarterback for the Denver Broncos. He had like one season, but after a while, it just wasn't working out anymore.
Yeah.
Now Tim Tebow has found a really lucrative, great position in broadcasting, and that's really working for him. So that was a shift to where at one period in time, something was working for you, but either you had a shift in your life, or it was a different season in your life to where that wasn't working anymore, and now you have to move on to something else. And this is you have to identify when it's time to move on to something else.
Okay.
Now, this week we're going to talk about what's never worked.
Right.
So to give an example, in like rehabbing a house, you know, when you go through the inspection period, you check off things that don't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You also check off things that never worked or just is not functional for the house. So I'll give you an example like central air. You know, if you have a property that needs to be rehabbed and the property doesn't have central air, that's a functional problem. That's something that was never there or it never worked, so you have to add that or you need to improve that. And so, when the mind rehab process, you have to look at the things in your life that's never worked, that you continue to do or you've done, made sometimes your whole life. Another example is if you need a 3 bedroom house and you have a 2 bedroom house, maybe you need a third bedroom for a home office or you need a den. That 2 bedroom house has never worked for you, so you need to do a room addition to where you have suitable space for what you need, because that 2 bedroom has never worked for you, but you may have lived in that house for 3 years, 5 years, and the amount of space has never worked for you. It's time for an improvement. So with the mind rehab process, it's time for a mental improvement. Um, so what I wanted to kind of just talk about today in this episode is, you know, in my example, for me, what's never worked was sales. I got into the family business, and I got into sales, and for me, what's never really worked was being like a pushy salesman, the hustler salesman. I found through going through this process that I was more into the creative process, creating the product to be sold, not actually selling the product. So what never worked for me was being a salesman. Now I tried to make it work by using what I was good at by teaching and explaining things to people, but what's never worked for me was being a salesman, a really salesy type guy. I was more into the product development. So for me, I kept trying to do that. It wasn't working, but I just kept trying to do it, and it never really worked. But it was like, well, I'm in this business. I've seen my family be successful in it, and so I'm just going to make this work. I'm going to try to make this work. Or a lot of times you can feel like you don't want to be the oddball in the group, and you do something just to go along with the program, something that never worked. And so it could be any aspect in your life. There's some people that you've grown up in a particular religion or you've grown up in a particular denomination, and it never really worked for you, never really resonated with you, or you never really fully agreed with it or fully understood it. You just kept going because that's how you grew up. Or that's what your family did, but you really didn't you didn't see a huge benefit in your life and you didn't really track with it. Or it can be the same thing, you know, especially with growing up. A lot of times you can look at your parents as a source of influence, you know, and so if your parents were in a certain type of business, a lot of times they can project their interests or their business on you. So you may have been born in a family business, kind of like Gary V. You know, his parents were in the wine business, and now he's killing it in the media business. Now he was able to turn it around a little bit, but it never really worked for him as far as
he outgrew that.
Yeah, he kind of outgrew that. So that's kind of like a combination of last episode and this episode. You know, that's something that's never really worked. You can try to make it. You can do to a certain extent. You can try to make something work, but there are certain things when you look at your life, it's never really worked for you. It's like when I get on the group chat with my guys, yeah, I'll sit and watch a basketball game, but basketball is just really it's not my thing. I can try to, be a good sport and all the playoffs and things like that, but I've never been a huge, basketball fan. It could be something on the lighter level with that, and it can go all the way to your career or being a entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Some people think because all my friends are entrepreneur, I need to start a business.
Woo!
Yeah, I need to be one too.
Like, just make sure,
right.
that you want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But I think that's really good. And I thought as you were speaking, I think this is a good place to insert. You know how the quote just simply says, "Question everything."
Mm-hmm.
Question everything, and especially when you're looking at the inspection process, when you're going in, if you're looking at a house, because we're in real estate, but you go in and you got a notebook, right? And you're going through everything. Like you are looking at every, the duct work. You're looking at the electricity. You're looking at the plumbing. You're going, why is this here? Why is that here? Do we need that here? Do I need that here? What's the function of this? What's the function of that? And then you realize you can do that in your own life. Question everything.
Right.
There's not. I think in our household, we do well in telling our kids to, it's okay to ask questions. Like, you know, we are a Christian household, but I don't want my children just to follow God just because their mom and dad are following God. I want them to know God for themselves.
Right.
I want you, I don't want you to just be doing things just because I told you to do it. I want you to have your own relationship with God. And that comes from questioning what you don't know. That comes from questioning, hey, I'm not sure about this, or what's the purpose of this, or why do you do that? And then when you create that type of positive environment to question things, you can find out what's working, what's not working, and you can be comfortable enough in yourself to say, what has never worked here? What am I doing that has never worked? And what in my next phase do I need to cut out? What do I need to change? Or what do I maybe need to do even more research on to better improve my life? So yeah, I think that's really good. And I say question everything. I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning things.
Yeah, so in this particular phase, it's just like doing an inspection. You're checking things down. Yeah. So your question says, does this work? Is this still working? Or has it never worked?
Yeah.
So there are certain things that never worked, and there are certain things that worked in a particular time period. Like, when I think about the rehab process, how like when you go to a like we don't have that many basements here in Vegas, but in Ohio you have basements. But when you have those real low ceilings, like even if you're short, where you gotta crouch down.
Yeah. And I'm short anyway, but we feel like we got
that just don't work. When you want to have a basement, I mean, it's basically like whatever's down there to function. The house is good, but you can't really use that. There's certain things that just never worked, and so there's certain things that you can identify. Is it something that you should stop doing?
Right.
But certain things you can identify, like, okay, this was working at one time and it's not working anymore. Or I don't think this is working anymore. But there's some things that's just clear if you really think about it that this has never worked. It's kind of like trying to be in the social scene or be like a social butterfly when you're really an introvert.
Right.
You keep going to these parties, but you can't wait to get out of there and get into your PJs and just be alone.
Be at home.
Because you're not the party animal. And you try to be social, not to say that you have to be by yourself all the time, but if you keep putting yourself in that atmosphere and it's not really you, it's never really worked. It's like that's something that you can clearly identify. Okay, this is something that I can go ahead and get rid of and discard. And certain things are like, okay, is it working or is it not working anymore?
Yes.
So this is something that you can kind of check down that hopefully make things clearer to improving the way that you think, the choices that you make, and how you feel about yourself. Because if there's certain things that's never worked, then that's an easily identifiable thing. That's something that used to work but it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So we didn't want this to be very long. This is kind of like a part 2
Right.
of last week. So this is what's never worked. So hopefully you can take this part of the process and apply it. And this is something that you can kind of identify the things that you need to or want to get rid of that just never worked. That you thought about it, you clearly identified that this never worked. This is something that I can get rid of. And so that's what the mind rehab process is all about: is identifying negative thoughts, negative actions, negative emotions, cutting out the bad things, and you can't replace it with something new until you get rid of the stuff that don't work anymore or never worked.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, guys. This one was short and sweet. This was a part 2. This was what has never worked. So, if you're following along with us, go ahead and write that stuff down this week. What has never worked? What are the things that have never worked? Maybe the actions, your career. Go through even your thought process. It's the points where what has never worked needs to be cut out. Needs to be cut out. So, well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you want to reach us, you can go to JameenWillis.com. Reach us there. You can also follow him. He does all the things Mind Rehab. This is really all him. This is his brainchild. I'm just the co-host. And then I ask the questions and things like that. But you can follow him on social media as well at Jameen Willis, and also all social media really at Jameen Willis, or visit JameenWillis.com. If you like these podcasts, we need you to do us a favor. We need you to like, subscribe, give us a review. Give us 5 stars. All that good stuff. We need you to do that. All right, guys. Have a great week, and we will chat with you next week. Bye. Bye-bye.